Hey guys, this is Frank Yecker, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Hey, this is Rich Franklin.
What's up, everybody? This is Chris Lieben.
This is Diego Sanchez, Randy Couture,
Alistair Overeem.
Hi, this is Stephen Bonner.
This is Don Fry.
Hey, I'm Phil, Mr. Wonderful Davis.
TJ Dillashaw.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
Submission Radio.
You're listening to Submission Radio.
Welcome to another episode of Submission Radio. It's the 4th of September. Dennis Gratoff here with Kasper Arlovski on the heels of UFC Hamburg, Arlovski versus Barnett. And we have a big show for you guys. The proper Submission Radio episode is now back. We have some fun guests for you.
Yeah, it is fantastic to be back with the regular format. For those who tuned in last week for the UFC Vancouver breakdown, that is not the regular Submission Radio. The regular Submission Radio has tons of sexy guests, and this week we've brought them. A lot of people, a lot of you guys have been requesting we get Richard Perez back on the show. He is, of course, Nate Diaz's boxing coach, and he used to coach Nick Diaz as well. We've got him back on the show due to hot and popular demand. We're going to be chatting all things Nate Diaz, and of course that loss to Conor McGregor at UFC 202. We've also got Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He's definitely in the spotlight right now with this whole situation with whether he's getting the next title shot, whether it's GSP. Some of you have called for Damian Maia to get the next title shot. So there's a lot to talk to with Wonderboy. And then, of course, we've got Bas Rutten, a show favorite. We always love having Bas Rutten back on the show. There's always a lot of fun stuff to talk about. We're going to be covering the hot topics of MMA, but to be honest, we spoke to Bas Rutten a couple of days ago. It's a pre-recorded interview, and it's a fun one. So strap yourselves in, guys, because you're in for a lot of action. And then we got another guest joining us right at the end to break down UFC Hamburg and talk about some other hot topics, don't we, Dennis?
Yeah, we liked him so much. He's such a legend in the business. We got Adam Hill back on the program. We'll be breaking down the fights from Hamburg and talking about this whole GSP situation. Adam's been around the block for a while. He knows how all this UFC stuff goes down. I'm really interested to find out what he thinks about some of the tough negotiating tactics that the UFC have been using right now with GSP and what it really means. So we'll get all that stuff from him. But guys, if you are just tuning in for the first time and you enjoy the program, when you finish listening to this episode, jump on and give us a review. We love hearing your thoughts, and it helps bump us up in certain areas. So iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, wherever you guys listen to it, make sure you jump on and give us a review. We love reading them. And as of next week, we'll read out a few new reviews, pick out a few, we'll read them out at the end of the episode. So we look forward to seeing what you guys have for us. And thank you to everybody who's left reviews. I mean, we do read those reviews ourselves, don't we, Cass? We go on there, we check them out. We appreciate all the kind words said. There's not some marketing man just sitting there scrolling through, nodding and giving thumbs up. We go through those things ourselves, and there's been some really cool things said. And every time we read those things, it really brightens our day. So if you guys enjoy the show, chuck down a review. We look forward to checking them out.
Yeah, no, I'm always amazed at actually how in-depth some of the reviews are. I mean, some of these reviews are like essays, which, to be honest, we like. We appreciate that someone's actually gone to take the time to give constructive feedback and say why they like the show or you know, why they've given 5 stars. So you guys basically give us whatever you think is appropriate. And don't forget, we do have official Submission Radio apparel coming out with some new designs very shortly. But if you want the stock standard classic Submission Radio apparel just to basically represent the show that obviously you guys like and listen to, you can go there on our website, submissionradio.com. Top right corner, there's a button, click store, and you can get it there, or you can just scroll down to the description of this video if you are watching on YouTube, and you can get it there. But if you do want to stay in touch and interact with us, guys, you can obviously stay on the website, submissionradio.com, go down to the bottom and send us an email, info@submissionradio.com, or the easiest way, just follow us on Facebook or Twitter @submissionaus, and our DM is open to basically anyone. So if you want to send us something, feel free to send us a message or just tweet it for the whole world to see. But without further ado, that's enough yakking from us. We're going to be cutting to our first guest, and Dennis, I believe, is on the line.
All right, guys, our next guest is coming off cornering one half of the main event for UFC 202. He is Nate Diaz's longtime boxing coach, and he joins us back here on the program. Richard Perez, welcome back to Submission Radio.
Oh, thank you for having me back.
Oh, it's our pleasure, Richard. We've been wanting to speak to you pretty much as soon as the event concluded, so let's get straight into it. Before we get into the specifics of the fight, which, by the way, was a wild and memorable one, we found out, obviously, Nate Diaz had some injuries going to that fight. Nate said that he came in this fight worse off than the last time. He said that he didn't get to train and he had an injury. He also said that he hurt his knee and he wasn't able to do jiu-jitsu, and then, you know, he got hit by training partner Alan Sanchez in the rib and had to stop sparring for about 2.5 weeks. Prior to the fight.
Yeah.
We got to ask you, how bad were these injuries going to the fight, Richard?
Well, they're bad. The knee was bad and the ribs were bad because, you know, when he was when he hurt his knee, he couldn't run. So then when it got a little better, he wanted to start sparring, and he's not in shape because wasn't really doing much. He worked a little bit on the mitts and a little bit of sparring. And he got better and better. When we got Sanchez in there, I mean, he went good 4 hard rounds. He was doing real good, but he was getting a little tired, and then that's when Sanchez caught him with the rib, and then that put him out there for a while. So he can't back out of a fight, and so I know that if he would have been injured, McGregor would have got stopped again. And Nathan wouldn't have got hit as much as he did that first round this last time because he was really sharp. He was sparring with guys McGregor's size, real good boxers, and he was whooping on them, So that's why I knew it wouldn't happen that way. But it did, and it came out best fight of the night. But he got cut, but if it would have been another 30 seconds, he would have tapped him out because McGregor was ready to go anyway.
I'm wondering, Alan Sanchez, is he a regular training partner? Was it the first time that Nate was training with him? Is that how sort of the injury happened?
No, he trains with him, because Alan likes the way Nathan spars, in boxing when it comes to boxing. So he comes now and then over here, and when he gets ready for a fight. Nathan gets ready for a fight. They'll spar.
Do you agree with Nate when he said that he came into this fight worse off than their first fight?
Yes, I do, because the 8 days that we really trained, he went all out. I mean, he wasn't injured, so it was good. Just trying to get in shape. And he did get a little better shape than he was then because he was in good shape the second time, but then he got injured with the knee, and so that set him back. And then he came back out there and wanted to start sparring and work with me. And then when he went with Sanchez, that's because he wasn't really doing everything he was supposed to do, sit-ups, all that stuff and push-ups. He was starting to do them getting back into it. And he wanted to go 5 rounds with Allen, and so that 5th round is when but other than that, I mean, yeah, he was, in fact, if you think about it, yeah, he was probably in better shape than because he couldn't train the last almost 3 weeks, before the fight. So that sets you back way back, And then the other one, he was training full all the way to the fight. So that makes a difference.
Obviously, huge fight, huge payday for Nate. You mentioned that he couldn't pull out of the fight. I'm just wondering, did you speak to Nate about possibly pulling out and rescheduling for a time where he's healthier?
No, because I've told him that before, and he said, "Richard, we can't do that. Well, they'll put me, put me to the side. So, I have to fight." So it makes sense. It makes sense, If he would have said, "Oh, I can't do it," it's just like Dos Santos. They would have put somebody else in, and then Nathan wouldn't have got that shot again. So he took a chance, and he did. I thought he did good. I thought he won 3, 4, and 5, but I went back home and watched it again, and I thought he beat him because you can't win a round by running. And Nathan, I thought Nathan McGregor threw a lot of kicks in the first round. Second round is pretty close. I gave it to McGregor, but 3, 4, and 5, no.
It's fascinating because when you spoke to us before the fight, you were talking about how Nate had his full training camp going into this fight, and you sort of couldn't let anyone know about these injuries. But what was your game plan going into this rematch, knowing that Nate has to deal with his injuries and also fight a healthier Conor McGregor?
Well, because I did say that because I don't, we don't want anybody to know, so we're trying to, keep it level, Yeah. And when he went out there, he's just going to go out there and do what he can, like throw kicks and try to coast a little bit more than he did the first time because he wasn't training. But I mean, he seemed like he had a burst of energy at the later rounds and started picking it up. I mean, he was a little tired, but McGregor was worse off. He just kept running, and you can't win a fight like that. But yeah, that's just things like that happen.
That first round saw McGregor he had a very dominant round. You saw McGregor knock Nate down. I'm wondering, how hurt was Nate in that first round? You were there, you had the close-up look, and what was your advice to him in the corner after that shaky start?
Well, even before the fight, we worked on, staying away from the left hand, but since he wasn't training, his timing is off, his reactions are off, everything's off because he hasn't been training, so he got caught. But he got back up. He wanted to stand the ground, but he got back up, and he was fine. He weathered the storm and went through it and went through the round.
You mentioned the rounds that you thought Nate won. Let's talk about that second round for a second, because that was the round where there was a lot of debate around it. Nate got knocked down, but he also had a strong finish to the round. What was your take on that round? So did you believe that Nate won that round, or did you think McGregor won it?
No, I feel that Nathan, but I knew they were going to give it to McGregor, I just felt that they were. And I knew that at the end that, Nathan asked me, I said, well, they're going to give it to McGregor, dude, because, I figured they want third fight, But I felt that McGregor didn't win that fight. A lot of people know that. But I felt that they did give it to him so they can have a third, So this time at 155, which is better for Nathan. But we don't know yet. Hopefully it happens.
You said to Nate that McGregor, they're going to give it to McGregor. When did you say that? Was that before the decision was announced?
No, yeah, we're in a cage, and I bet they're probably going to give it to him, Nathan, because it was, they probably I figured they probably want another third fight, which, everybody would want to see, even the fans, but they don't realize that Nathan was hurt, but still Nathan made a great fight out of it. Being out of shape, he made a great fight out of it. Boy, he another 30 seconds, McGregor wouldn't have made it.
There was an interesting sort of moment right after the decision was read out. Nate sort of turned to you, and they say no one knows what to say in the losing fighter's locker room. What did you say to Nate in the back once everything sort of sunk in? And what did you say to him in that moment? Because he looked pretty upset, and I think he said a couple of words to him in that octagon after the decision was read out.
Well, of course he's going to be upset. So am I. Everybody, we're upset about it, and there's nothing we can do about that. So we just go back to the dressing room, and he knows, we know that he won the fight, but how you can't turn it around. So it's over and done with. We just say, hey, we're going to get another third fight. We'll get ready, get healed, and get ready for it. Whenever they, decide to do it.
I'm wondering, that night, was there you obviously prepared for a certain version of McGregor. Was there anything that surprised you about McGregor and the way he performed? Anything that sort of was different to the way you were preparing Nate?
Well, McGregor did the same thing he did last time. Believe me, he threw kicks, but the last time Nathan, moved around more. This time he didn't, because like I said, if you're a fighter, you know what it's like not to train like almost 3 weeks before a fight. You're not going to have a lot of that you had before when you're in better shape, So that's why McGregor looked good. But after the second round, McGregor didn't look good at all. And Nathan was, wasn't in the best shape, but he did better. He was more aggressive. He had him in the cage more. He threw combinations. And McGregor kept running. So, he was just looking at the time. So that's the difference.
Now, Nate said that he rewatched the fight later that night. Richard, did you watch it with him?
No, I didn't. I didn't watch it with him.
When did you get a chance to rewatch the fight?
I watched it when I came home.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I came home and watched it. I watched it like 5 times already, and the judges were going for McGregor. You could tell. It's obvious. And I figured, okay, they want a third fight. A company just bought it out. They want to make more money. They just bought the UFC. If I bought the UFC, I would try to make it as best as I can to get a third fight. Doesn't that make sense? To make more money. That's a moneymaker right there. That's a big moneymaker, more than any other fight that's happening now. So they would be smart to do a third fight.
I'm curious to ask you, the post-fight press conference, we saw you were there with Nate. Not sure if you noticed or not, but Nate was vaping something, and when he was asked, he said it was cannabidiol oil. Now USADA is investigating the vape pen because Nate was still considered in competition when he was smoking it. I just want to know, what are your thoughts on the whole situation? Do you have any concern that he may get suspended due to using it post-fight?
I don't feel like they should suspend him. Doctors prescribe you with drugs left and right that are not even good for you. And I don't do what he does, but I understand what he's doing, because it's for pain. There's a place here in Modesto that have they have a big company here that deal with people that have sicknesses that they're using the oil that Nathan was using to cure them. To help them, like epilepsy. There's people that have injuries in their body. They use it and it works. And they have 6 counselors there that are pastors. They're all educated. They will talk to you about this and explain to you that it's not just to get high. So I feel like he was being his own doctor. Let's put it that way.
Being his own doctor. Yeah, I mean, we know that obviously, Nick Diaz, he's had his controversies with not the same, but obviously similar substances. Knowing that it's sort of a touchy subject, did anybody in the team warn him, maybe not to smoke it at least during the press conference or, the 6 hours after the event, just in case there's issues with USADA?
I didn't know he was doing. I didn't know he was gonna pull it out. We were just walking and he started interviewing, and he just felt that this is what he feels it's going to be good for him, and he's not going to hide it. He's going to explain to people that this is what it takes to have medicine from a doctor. So, he explained to himself. He explained to everybody in the world, everybody was watching, that this is what I'm using it for,
So you mentioned that you think this rematch with Conor McGregor should happen. We actually spoke to Nate the day after the fight, and he said he's open to big fights and big paydays. Is there anybody else that you see, Nate, potentially fighting if Conor McGregor's taken up for the foreseeable future? Another big fight or another big payday that you think might be good for him?
But and I know, and the media knows, that it was such an awesome fight, storm. It was like a storm coming down, and people want to see. Everybody's telling me, I want to see that again. They want to see that again. That's going to be the most big payday for both of them, and for the business, that people, the new UFC people that own it. So if they're smart enough, they will do it. They will set that up. There's nobody. If Nathan goes and fights BJ Penn or Georges St-Pierre or anyone like that, or even McGregor, that's not going to be a moneymaker, because those guys, they haven't fought in a long time, and they're not action fighters like Nathan fighting McGregor. If anything, Georges St-Pierre would take him to the ground and just hold him and just wrestle him around. And McGregor will probably beat him up, because McGregor's not good on the ground, so he'll probably tap him out. Just like BJ Penn. They're good on the ground, so it's not an action fight where they're going to want to stand up.
It's interesting that you mentioned BJ Penn. He's not really a name that's been linked to Nate Diaz at all. Is that someone that's sort of been on the radar in any way for you guys? I know you obviously want the McGregor rematch, but is that someone who you've considered as a possible opponent for Nate?
No. I was talking about McGregor, because before this, they asked BJ Penn and they asked Georges St-Pierre to fight McGregor, and they turned it down. I don't know why. Maybe because of the time. It was less time. The first time, that they fought, because it was 11-day notice. That's probably why they didn't do it. I don't know. But that's why I mentioned his name. If BJ Penn or Georges St-Pierre would fight McGregor, it's not going to be a big money maker like Nathan, because they've fought twice already, and it was a good action fight. Who would you rather see? Would you rather see Nathan and McGregor, or BJ Penn, or Georges St-Pierre with McGregor? Be honest.
Well, given
watching an action fight,
given the three options, look, I'm not going to lie. I'm intrigued by the whole GSP McGregor thing. I think it'd be interesting just to see what GSP looks like. But we were there live, and we absolutely loved the crap out of the McGregor-Nate Diaz rematch. It was an amazing fight. And look, we'd love to see a rematch somewhere down the line. I guess the issue's lying. It doesn't look like the UFC are too interested in doing it. McGregor has, other options. Is there anybody else that, and even Nate himself the other day sort of mentioned that, look, he considers it 2-0 against McGregor. He's looking at other big fights. Is there anyone else that you think would be a good suit for Nate as a next fight?
Well, right now, I'm not. I can't see. I'm not focusing on it right now, because I just got back from Vegas. I got my gym going, and Nathan and I will talk and see what happens.
Well, if Nate does get the third fight with McGregor and comes in healthy, do you believe the fight plays out differently from the rematch at UFC 202? And also, explain your theories as to why it would play out differently.
Well, yeah, because hopefully he doesn't get hurt if they fight again. He doesn't get injured in camp. Then he'll be sharp. If you watch a lot of his fights, when he's not injured, he's sharp. He puts people away. He boxes them up, takes them to the ground, and it's over. But these last two fights, one was an 11-day notice, and this one he got injured. So, but still, there were action fights. Nathan put out. That's why Nathan puts it out. Like BJ Penn. Georges St-Pierre was supposed to fight Nick one time, and he backed out because he had a leg injury. Now, if it had been Nick and Nate, they would have went in there and fought it anyway. And by Nathan being injured, he went out there and he did his best and he put it out. They got best fight of the night. Everybody roared. Everybody's talking about it. That's all they're talking about right now. I have people call me all the time from different states congratulate me and Nathan, for being a good fight. And sorry he got hurt, but he made a good fight. So, that makes me feel good.
That's
even
good.
Though, yeah.
Even though, of course, it didn't go your way. But no, it absolutely was a fight for the ages. I'm also wondering, one of the other stories sort of leading into that fight and surrounding that fight was obviously the rivalry between the two teams, Team McGregor and obviously Team Diaz. Now that this fight's happened, I don't know if you sort of played into this much, but do you consider this rivalry between the two teams over, or do you believe there's still some unfinished business?
Unfinished business, number 3. They got to make number 3. If I own UFC, I would say let's let this happen. We're gonna make some money off of it.
Would you
have them go back to 145?
Would you possibly do a whole main card of Team McGregor versus Team Diaz? You guys put up four fighters. They put up 4 fighters. You make an event out of it.
Heck yeah. And after that, he can go back to 145 and he'll make money. Well, I don't know how much money he'll make because there's nobody there unless he fights Frankie Yeager. Well, Yeager got beat by Aldo, so I don't know what they're going to do. But if I was the UFC owner, I would say let's do number 3 again. After that, he can go back to 145 if he wants, or 155. That's where they're fighting at, 155, which is good. If they fight 155, Nathan wins, he can go for the belt, but that's not what he wants. He wants, just like McGregor, they want the money. They want payday.
What about this for a scenario? Nate Diaz, you do Nate Diaz and McGregor 3, you have Nick Diaz come back, and then you have other team members, and you do it at UFC 209. How about that?
Oh, sure. That would be great. But you got to talk to UFC owners. They're the ones that are running it. I mean, Dana White's the manager, but they're the ones that really call the shots. And they need to know,
Richard, we'll pull some strings. We'll get the wheels in motion. But before we let you go,
you're the man.
You know how much we love having you on the show, but before we let you go, because you're a busy man and there's so much happening at Richard Perez Boxing, we have to ask you, how soon would you like to see Nate return to the gym and start boxing again? And if things went to plan, would he be ready to fight again by UFC 205, Madison Square Garden card in November?
Well, I can't predict the future. We have to look and see, because McGregor, he's got a broken, I guess, a hairline fracture, shin or something, and sprained his ankle. So they say he's out till 17. So I we have to wait and see. Hopefully, that sounds good. I mean, you guys know what you're talking about.
But how is Nate Diaz in terms of health? Has he gone back to training, or is he still sort of taking a break?
Oh, I haven't really talked to him lately because, he did go to L.A., then he went somewhere else, I forgot where, but he's home now. So I imagine he's probably riding bike, swimming, He's doing something, believe me.
Well, there you guys go. I believe he was hanging out with Snoop Dogg at one point as well. So it was good to see what happens next, Richard. Thanks so much for coming on the show, guys. Make sure to check out Richard's awesome gym, Richard Perez Boxing. You can find out more information by going to richardperezboxing.com. Give him a visit. Make sure you tell him Submission Radio sent you. Once again, Richard, thank you for your time. We're excited to see what happens next.
Thank you so much for having me, bud. You're all right. You're the man.
Our pleasure, Richard. We'll let you go and we'll chat soon. You have a great day. Thanks for the time.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye.
Hey, everybody. This is Tyron, the chosen one, Woodley. You are listening to Submission Radio.
Our next guest is coming off big wins over Jake Ellenberger, Johnny Hendricks, and Rory MacDonald. He is now one of the names that's been linked to the next welterweight title fight against Tyron Woodley. One of the nicest guys in MMA, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. Welcome back to Submission Radio.
What's up, guys? Glad to be on with you again.
It's always great when you come on. Now, we're going to get straight into it and get your thoughts on the recent happenings in the welterweight division. Damian Maia defeated Carlos Condit in under 2 minutes at UFC on Fox 21. You were obviously there in person with a pretty sweet view. What did you think of Damian's performance that night?
Oh, man, Damian was definitely on point, man. I mean, he's got a very crazy skill set. Obviously, everybody knows his jiu-jitsu. His striking's not that good. His wrestling is getting better every day. And, man, he just, I didn't expect him to win. I thought Carlos Condit was going to go out there. I know he's a better, well-rounded fighter. But the way he just treated Carlos Condit was just unbelievable, man. Ended up taking his back like he does everybody else and sunk in that rear naked choke. It's almost like that's all he looks for is taking the back, looking for that rear naked choke. I think his last, 4 or 5 fights have been rear naked chokes, right?
Well, did you get a chance to speak to Damian afterwards by any chance? And if so, what did you guys talk about?
Yeah, we actually talked. Actually, the next day we rode in the same car to the airport together, and he just was like, he's the nicest guy in the world, man. And I congratulated him, tell him it was a freaking awesome fight. And he's like, yeah, man, I heard you. They're saying that you're getting that fight next, but hopefully it's a fast process because I know I want to fight for that title. I'm 38 years old, and I was like, yeah, man, no worries. I know. So we just talked about that and kind of left it at that, and just kind of steered our way away from the fighting and was talking about family and things like that, but we didn't spend too much time on who's fighting who,
I was going to say, is that a little bit surreal? Obviously, you guys are both gunning for the same thing. There was, discussion about who's sort of next for the title. Was that kind of surreal, riding in the car with him, having that conversation?
Yeah, man, it was pretty cool. We've actually had a lot of time to, to chat before. We were both sponsored by Bad Boy at one point, and was on some of the Bad Boy tours, and so we got to hang out a little bit and kind of conversate some. And of course, at the time he was at a higher level. I was just beginning. It was like several fights in the UFC, I believe. But man, the coolest guy in the world. So yeah, man, he's a good buddy too.
Well, he's super nice, but now that you're out of the car with him, let's compare both sort of resumes. What makes you believe that you're sort of the more deserving one for the next title shot compared to Damian Maia, who a lot of people are sort of calling for to possibly have a title shot as well?
I do believe that, after me and Tyron fight, that, he should be getting the title fight. I think he's proven himself in the welterweight division, but if you look at I've got the longer winning streak. I'm 7, he's 6. I beat Rory McDonald, who's the last guy that beat him. But man, the guys that he's fought, Carlos Condit is a monster. Neil Magny, Gunnar Nelson, they're all really good fighters. But I think I have beaten the better fighters, the more prestigious fighters in the division than he has. And obviously I have the longer winning streak. So I know he's throwing out there, he's an older guy and thinks he should get it before me because he's an older guy. But hey, I couldn't help that he started, MMA at a later age, I feel like I started at a later age. I started, I think it was 28 when I started mixed martial arts. So yeah, man, I'm definitely the one that deserves that next title shot.
It's amazing how, despite obviously the differences in years and when you guys started and backgrounds, the way you've sort of aligned at this same point in time. In the post-fight interview, Brian Stan, when he was interviewing Damian Maia, he mentioned on live national television that you will be facing Tyron Woodley next. Considering that the UFC, they keep pretty tight-lipped about fights until they're official, what did you think when you heard him say that?
Well, for me, that just kind of made it official. You heard it from Dana. Right, everybody's heard it from Dana, but to hear it again, it's like, man, it's this is it. This is going to happen. I'm in Simpsonville right now, preparing as if I'm fighting in Madison Square Garden. That's where my head's at, as if it's going to happen at Madison Square Garden. It may happen there, it may not happen there, but I believe that I got that next title shot.
Other than matchmaker Brian, has anybody from the UFC confirmed this with you?
No, nothing's really said. The only thing that we're going on is what Dana White said. Normally when he goes out there and he puts it out there like that, it's going to happen. So very rarely do you see him going back on something that he said like that. So we're taking it as if that's the truth. That's what we're preparing for, and we're taking his word for it.
There have certainly been instances in the past. I have to bring up that point about Miocic Tate, where she originally had that title shot. She did, and of course, the rest is history. But GSP was on UFC Tonight, and he spoke about the possibility of fighting Tyron Woodley at UFC 206. I'm just wondering, did you hear the interview? Did you get a chance to watch it? And did that give you any more concern that this fight with Woodley, it may not be solid. It may not happen next.
For a big name like that to come out and say that, yeah, it kind of does, but. Does Tyron want to wait that long? 206 is when, in December?
Correct, yes.
Or January, do you remember?
December,
yeah. Okay. Yeah, so I don't know, man. I don't know if they're still going through negotiations with George or not, or, waiting on Dana. I'm not sure what the deal is, but, you know what? It doesn't bother me that much. When you hear it, it's like, man, could this really happen? But whenever it cut off, I looked at my dad and we're like, nah, they're giving it to me, man. It's happening, So, yeah, it kind of jabs at you a little bit. And, But yeah, man, I'm set for facing Tyron Woodley. That's what Dana White said. That's what we're going for.
Well, while we're speaking of Dana White, he said in an interview that he feels like GSP no longer has the drive to be a champion, which in a lot of ways sort of prompted George to respond to him during that interview that you watched with your dad and say, let me fight Tyron Woodley, then we'll see if I don't want to be champion again. What do you think about Dana's comments? And do you think it was a bit of a sneaky way to get GSP to get fired up and take that fight with Woodley?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know if it's a sneaky way to try and get him to fight Woodley. And, he's been calling out Woodley since he won. So I don't know, man. I believe that Georges St-Pierre, I mean, he's been training since he's retired. I mean, the first time. I mean, he's, I see Snapchats all the time or Instagram pics that him, he's training at John Danaher's, or he's working in kickboxing, or he's working karate with Raymond Daniels. The guy is constantly training, and I believe that if he steps out there, you're probably gonna see a different Georges St-Pierre.
It's an interesting thing because in that interview, George mentioned some potential people that he'd like to fight. He mentioned Damian Maia. He mentioned Nick Diaz. He mentioned the champ, Tyron Woodley, but he didn't really mention Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, who a lot of people feel like are right up at the top of the division. And it was something that a lot of people on Twitter sort of brought up and have been tweeting about. Why didn't he say Stephen's name? Is it because of the friendship? Is it because he just doesn't want to fight him because he knows it's a tough matchup? Did you notice that? Was that a point that you and your dad noticed? And if so, why do you think he left your name out of that list of people that he wanted to fight?
Of course, this is just me thinking, it's because we do have a relationship, He was the reason, my inspiration to actually start mixed martial arts in the first place. Going up there, training with those guys, Faraz Hobby George, Rory, and those guys up there were, they were the reason why I'm in the game. And we do have a relationship, and he knows that he was the reason that I stepped out there, so I think it's just a friendship thing. I don't think he would ever have faced Rory McDonald either, so I do believe that. So I didn't really sit there and think, hey, why did he not call my name? I knew why he didn't call it, and that's just because we have a relationship, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Obviously, you're focusing on the UFC 205 in Madison Square Garden, but we did see an interview recently, I believe it was from the Maia fight, where you said that if hypothetically GSP or Nick Diaz got the title shot first, you're willing to take a fight in between, obviously to stay active and relevant. Do you sort of worry that verbalizing that may hurt your bargaining power with the UFC if they kind of see that you've already accepted that you might get passed over for the next title shot?
No, not at all, man. I mean, I think they know that I really deserve that shot. And like you said, this was just like an if thing. What if they just didn't do it?
Mm-hmm.
I could sit there and answer that all day. Yeah, I'm not going to sit back and wait for a year like some other people were doing before. I'm a fighter, man. That's what I do. I'm not going to sit there and stay back and wait for things to happen. You got to stay relevant in this game. And I just love to fight, man. That's just what I've been doing for a very long time. To be, I was never really the trash talker or the bully to try and get somebody to, bully somebody into fighting me or anything, because I got 600 kids right here in Simpsonville that look up to me and they watch every move I make out there, in social media, in front of the TV and Fox Sports 1 during the fights. So I just want to be a good role model for them. And I know the fact that I've worked very hard to get to where I'm at, and I know I deserve that fight. And me answering that was just, it's the truth, man. I think it's crazy if they don't give me this fight. I know I know all the fans out there, and I want to thank them for actually backing me up. All my fans, all the fans out there, UFC fans, are like, man, give it to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He's the guy that deserves it. He should be fighting for the title now. But yeah, man, I mean, if for some crazy reason that they wouldn't, of course, I'm a fighter, man. That's what I love to do. I'd fight for free, to be honest with you.
Wow.
Yeah, well, don't say that, Stephen, because we know people like to listen to this interview, so you might get a different contract if this one comes up to an end. But before we jump to sort of what is next, if you don't get this title shot, I just want to ask you. You mentioned that you and GSP are friends, and he left your name out of the conversation because obviously he doesn't want that fight to happen because of the friendship. But if he does get that next title shot against Tyron Woodley, there's a very, very good chance GSP once again becomes the welterweight champion. And in that situation, what happens with your friendship? Because you've obviously planned to become a champion. This is your time as well. What do you do with that friendship? How do you handle that situation if George becomes champion?
You know, he knows that that's my goal. You know, he knows that's my goal, and that's what I'm in the game for, is to win the title, to be the best. And I think it just comes around as like, you know, what happened with me and Rory. We're good friends, and we'll be friends before and friends after the fight. You know, if it comes to that, I wouldn't want to, obviously, because he's a good buddy of mine, and you know, it's kind of hard to go out there and do battle. I know I was a lot closer to George than I was ever with Rory, but man, yeah, you know, I think he knows that I'm shooting for that, and for him to go out there and, you know, to go for that title, you know, then he must be willing to do battle as well. You know what I mean? So, as much as it would suck if it ever did come to that, man, you know, I wouldn't want to be honest with you, but those are my goals. That's what I want to do. That's what I will accomplish, to be the best. And to be the best, you got to, you know, to have that title belt around your waist.
So if GSP becomes champion, no doubt about it, you're still gunning for that fight. You're not going to take another fight. You're not going to take a break, or maybe let Maya have that fight with GSP and see what happens. Whoever comes out, if you don't get this next title shot, whoever comes out the winner between GSP and Tyron Woodley, you're still calling out that person for the next fight.
That's the way it goes, man. I'll probably call him first, like, hey, man, what's going on, son? What's going on? You know that I'm after this title belt. You know, I think we would have a good conversation. But yes, yeah, man. I mean, for him to actually say he's going for the title and knowing that I'm going for the same thing, hey, you know, that's just the way it goes, I guess. Sometimes I wouldn't want it, like I said, but sometimes you got to do what you got to do.
What a time to be alive. I feel like, honestly, Stephen, this whole process would have just been a lot easier on you if Tyron had accepted your challenge when you called him out after UFC 201. I was wondering, what went through your mind when you called him out on TV and he declined your offer? Is that something you still think about?
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, I knew for a fact that he was going to say, yeah, man, let's do it. Madison Square Garden, let's go, you know? And then he hits me with the, nah, man, you know, you wanted to fight Robbie, so you're going to fight Robbie. I'm going to get a money fight. I'm like, I was laughing, but in my head, I was like, is this guy kidding? This guy's got to be kidding. You know, I'm looking at Cormier, and Cormier's looking at me. He's like, I'm pretty sure this guy's serious. You need to go back at him, you know? And, dude, I was like, what the heck, man? It really surprised me. You know, what champion doesn't accept the number one contender? You know what I mean? That's just how it goes. You defend that title shot a few times before you ever start fighting or asking for a money fight. Come on. You know, what's going on? I mean, you hear, you know, Conor McGregor doing that, but Conor McGregor, look, I mean, Tyron's nowhere near the level of Conor McGregor when it comes to, you know, marketing and, you know, popularity. He's just not there, you know? I think everybody else, the fans, see that as well. And it upset not just me, but a lot of other fans and people who follow the UFC too.
Well, we know that it's just who you are as a person, but do you sort of regret being so polite when you called him out? And also, there's that moment where he says what he says, and then it looks like you're sort of holding yourself back a little bit. Have you rewatched that point where you've called him out, and what do you wish you sort of said to him after he told you it's not happening?
You know, I'm glad I did hold back. You know, that just shows my self-control, and I know a lot of people, a lot of my students were watching me then, and but if I could have gone back, or if I could have got him in a room with closed doors, I would definitely let him know, man. Or at that time, I was like, you're crazy. You know, when you were a few months ago preaching how you deserve the fight, give it to you when you were ranked number 4, and they still gave it to you, and now you're doing this to me. It sounds like you're a hypocrite, man. You know, that's just crazy talk. It sounds like to me, you know, you're scared. You're scared to fight me. Let's do this. Let's go. I mean, I don't know what else to say without throwing in a few cuss words, you know?
Hey, that will be I think a world first for Stephen Thompson, especially in this show. Well, I was going to say, I mean, a lot of fans, they sort of have harped on Tyron Woodley. They've given him a lot of grief about, you know, doing that. He's obviously going out and saying that he wants the big money fights. There's a short window in MMA and he wants to make that money. But, you know, you sort of said to yourself, do you think it's a case of, you know, do you think being afraid is part of it, or do you think it really is just him trying to go out and make more money?
Well, as hard as he's fighting it, it does seem that way. As if it was just the money and it doesn't seem like the UFC is going to give it to him, okay, I'll fight the number one contender. But it's like it's going crazy. Now he's throwing racism out there, and now he's just kind of going over and beyond of what the whole situation, to be honest with you. And yeah, man, it's starting to seem that way. I mean, you're the champion. You should be taking all newcomers, man. Especially when you just get the belt. You had the belt on for 30 seconds, and you're already shutting me down, asking for a money fight. It doesn't work that way, pal.
Well, out of yourself, GSP, and Nick Diaz, who do you think is the toughest stylistic matchup for Woodley at the moment?
Wow. Talking about including me?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so yourself, GSP, and Nick Diaz. I mean, those seem like the options that Tyron is looking at. You, GSP, or Nick Diaz. Who do you think is the toughest stylistically for him?
I think it's me. I really do think it's me. I mean, he is a grappler. I think he'll do very well against the other wrestlers and other grapplers. That's just the type of fighter he is. He loves to throw that one shot to shoot for the double. I think he feels more comfortable in the clinch, and it's very difficult to get me there. He's not used to somebody throwing the odd angles, the kicks that I throw out there. And you can't bring in sparring partners that simulate my style. It's very difficult to do that. So yeah, man, I think stylistically I'm the worst for him. I think he could do very well against somebody like Damian Maia, using his wrestling to defend that takedown to keep the fight standing. Same thing with George. George is a little bit more well-rounded, I believe. His striking's a lot better, I think, than Tyron Woodley's. I think he would beat Tyron as well. But I think Damian would have a hard time with Tyron.
Wow.
And plus, I think it would be a boring fight.
Let me ask you this.
I think it would be really boring.
Let me ask you this, Stephen, because obviously you've been chasing this title for so long, pretty much ever since we've had you on the show and before that. It's always been your goal. But I'm just wondering, what is it specifically that makes you want to be the UFC champion? I mean, what exactly are you fighting for? Is it the prestige of being the best at 170, or is it the monetary rewards and the financial security, for your future that come with holding the belt?
No, man, it's literally the lifelong commitment to this game. I've been in the martial arts since I was 3 years old, and I started fighting at the age of 15, and I've never stopped. I've worked my butt off to get to where I am today, and for them to take that away from me when I'm so close, when I'm here and the rightful guy to fight for that title, that's why that's why I do it, man. That's why I'm fighting so hard. And it's not just for me. It's for, most importantly, my friends and my family and my sparring partners, the guys who've been there with me from day one, who's been through the abuse that I put them through to get here. For the money, nah, man. If I wasn't in the UFC, I'd still be fighting somewhere. Like I said, man, I don't care what the UFC thinks, that I'd fight for free. I just want to be the best fighter. That's my goal, the best fighter, and respected that.
Wow, that is phenomenally noble, especially in this sort of era where everybody's going after the money fights. Obviously, the last guy that you defeated, Rory McDonald, he's gone over to Bellator. It seems like money was sort of one of the reasons for that. Is it safe to say that regardless, we'll never see you in any kind of organization? As long as you can stay in the UFC, you will, because that's sort of where the best are.
To be yeah, man, that's where I believe the best are. And I mean, I've got a job. I teach karate classes all day long, and it's a very great job. It's a fun job, man. It's definitely a whole lot better than fighting. Teaching classes out there, having fun. So I've got a job, man. I fight for the fun of it. The money's just a bonus. So yeah, man. I just do it because I like doing it. This is who I am. This is what I do. My brothers are fighters. My sisters are fighters. My mom, my dad, we're all fighters. That's just the way our family is.
So if you do find yourself in a situation where, okay, the UFC 206 GSP versus Tyron Woodley title fight, and you've got to choose an opponent in the meantime, do you go for Damian Maia because he's the person that people are saying is one of the guys that should get the title shot? Do you think that's your clearest way to making sure that the next fight will be for the title if you beat him?
Yeah, I mean, either him or Robbie Lawler. You know, he's the guy that held the title before. He's the one guy ranked above me. Either him or Robbie Lawler would be the guys.
And speaking of Damian Maia and his skill set, like we mentioned, that it's amazing what he could do to people on the ground, and a lot of people have sort of questioned whether or not your grappling skills are at the top level. But in your latest fights, you really showed that you've come a long way in those areas. Would you say that a fight with Damian Maia in a lot of ways would be even more dangerous than fighting the current champion Tyron Woodley because Maia is so good in those areas that people perceive to be your weaknesses?
Yeah, man, definitely. Definitely. He is a scary guy in the division because it's literally we're the same but at the opposite ends. You know, he's so good at his jiu-jitsu, and he always finds, even against really well-rounded fighters, he always seems to get him down there. But the only thing about Damian, he works awfully hard to get the takedown, which means he gasses out. You know, and if you watch this the fight with LaFleur, even with Rory McDonald, even his last fight with the fight before that against Matt Brown, he gasses out because he struggles. He works really, really hard to get you down, and it's a constant thing. He shoots. If he can't shoot, he'll move around and he'll try and shoot again. So in the third rounds, into the second, and early on in the third, he's done basically. I don't know if you saw the Matt Brown fight. In the last round, he was almost done. The only reason that Matt Brown got choked out is because he jumped in Damian Maia's guard for some reason. He hit him in the head, knocked him back, jumps in his guard, and that's where he likes to play. So he ended up taking his back again and tapping him out. I felt if Matt Brown could have backed up and said, hey, get back on your feet again, stuffed another shot because he was really, really tired, and finished him. He could have finished him. But, yeah, man, he's a dangerous fighter, man. He really is. That's still going to be another thinker, another wary fight, kind of like a Rory McDonald fight. You know, you gotta stay back, kind of pick your shots, and really think about what's going on. Always be on guard with Damian Maia.
Well, you know, I mean, that would be another fight where you'd sort of be climbing the ladder. I feel like you're pretty much at the top of this ladder already. I feel like you deserve the title shot, and I think a lot of people sort of feel that way as well. You're training for November 17th in New York, where you want to face Tyron Woodley for the welterweight title in what would be the most important fight of your career thus far. Before we let you go, Steve, and we have to say we appreciate your time, what's the message that you want to get out there? Do you have a message for the UFC or Tyron Woodley? Anything you want to get out there?
Well, I think the UFC and Tyron know exactly what the deal is, you know. They know exactly what I want, and UFC knows what's going to happen. I think Tyron knows he's going to face me. That's why he's fighting so hard right now not to. But I do want to thank you guys and the fans for actually putting it out there on my behalf, and you know, really pushing for me to fight for that title. So I just want to thank you guys and thank the fans.
Well, there you guys go. He is still the nicest guy in MMA, and when he's not teaching karate classes and giving back to his community, he's one of the baddest dudes in the welterweight division. You can follow him on Twitter at Wonderboy MMA, and if you guys want to see him get this next title shot, jump on social media, let the UFC know about it, let them know that you want him to have the next title shot. They listen to that kind of thing. Stephen, we look forward to seeing what happens next, and who knows, possibly seeing you at UFC 205 becoming a champion. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Hi, this is Conor Nelson, and you're listening to Submission Radio.
Alright guys, our next guest is a show regular and one of our favorite people to chat to. He is a former UFC heavyweight champion, multiple-time king of Pancrase, a Hollywood star, a UFC Hall of Famer, and inventor of the O2 trainer. He is none other than El Guapo himself, Bas Rutten. Bas, welcome back to Submission Radio. How's things with you, man?
Well, it's good because now I'm an actor. You said that's going to be great. You know, I always say I'm an actor when I solely can make a living from my acting. That's the moment I would call myself an actor. But I really appreciated that.
Dude, the dance and Here Comes the Boom. If anyone could pull something as epic as that off, believe me, you're officially an actor. So welcome to the acting club. Now, it's been a while since we've had you on, so we want to go back a few weeks to UFC 202, where Nate Diaz and Conor McGregor had their highly anticipated rematch. The night ended with Conor McGregor as the winner, and the score being 1 each. What did you think of the fight and how each man performed on that night?
Okay, first of all, I thought McGregor won. So that's that. Again, let's get out of the way. I thought he won 3 rounds, and he did phenomenal, especially in the first 2 rounds when he was tipped up. His stamina was still going very strong. And then he had a little dip in round number 3. He needed to get his second win, and that's when Diaz, started coming. But I think Diaz just got hit with one big punch in the middle of that onslaught, and that stopped him from attacking. But I think that if he would have really pushed it at that moment, he could have won the fight. But McGregor, man, people say, oh, he was running away. I think actually that's a very smart thing to do. Just get out of the way, take a break, go back, and then continue your fighting. So I thought he was very calculated, Conor. Diaz, it looked like he had no answer in the first 2 rounds, right? He just got tagged over and over again. He dropped him 3 times. I thought it was a great fight, especially because they both got tired, and then Conor first, and then he got out of it again, and around 4 he came back, it went back and forth, and then especially the 5th round. So this is a really good fight. Now we want to see, of course, the 3rd match.
Well, where do you stand on the 3rd match? How soon do you want to see it? Where do you stand on that?
Well, away. He needs to defend his title now against Jose Aldo. That's first. He should have done that before already, I believe. But, so now he's going to have to go back to 145, defend his title, then decide if he wins or loses, but deciding if he wants to stay at 145. I think it's going to be hard for him. I believe I mentioned it on the show before. I saw him one time on the day of the weigh-in, and it was almost unrecognizable. He's cutting a lot of weight. You can tell he shrinks, everything shrinks. And then of course a day fight time, then they gained a lot of fluids again, and they look much more human. But just the fact when I saw him like that, I go, ooh, he's cutting a lot of weight. That could in the future could be a problem.
Let me ask you this, Bas, because obviously we've been on that sort of train as well, that McGregor needs to go back to 145, he needs to defend his belt. Or what do you think about this option? What do you think about him giving up the title, and do you think maybe it's wiser for him to stop cutting all that weight and just go and do potentially other big fights against, lightweights, or, if he really wants to, welterweights, but let's say lightweights, and do other money fights?
I would love to see him at lightweight, at 155. I think that he would do really well. I think that would be the best weight class for him. I'm always been a believer of not cutting weight. And of course that stems from all the way back when there were no weight classes. But still, when I fought heavy guys like 245, 250, I never thought about being heavier. I always thought only about stamina, because I know these big guys, they're going to run out of stamina, unless you're Cain Velasquez, of course. But that was always my power. I thought, okay, I can be in trouble in the beginning of the fight, because of the power and the weight difference. But eventually, if I just survive 4 or 5 minutes, then I can start taking over. And that's pretty much always, it worked out well for me.
Well, it's an interesting situation, because do you envision a scenario where Conor McGregor can fight Eddie Alvarez at UFC 205 without having to give up his title in featherweight?
No, they shouldn't do that. If they do that, it's taking way too long. Or you mean him giving it up? Or
well, yeah. Well, I mean, let's say his next, because it looks like the next fight they're really sort of aiming for is this Eddie Alvarez fight in New York. Is there any way they can take that fight without having, I guess, with him keeping his featherweight belt? Is there any scenario the UFC can play out? Any storyline? Any ideas they could possibly have to keep him from fighting in featherweight for his next fight and keep the belt?
No, they cannot do it. Well, they can do it if they want, but it's not going to be well received. I would say what you said, give up the title then, step away from it and go for the title shot at 155. That I can see happening, but both that, no. I think there's going to be backlash. I think people are going to speak up.
Eddie's really found his groove in the UFC. I mean, he just had an amazing performance over RDA a couple of months ago to become the new champion. If Conor challenges him for the title, how do you see a fight like that going? I mean, based on what you saw against Nate Diaz, what does that sort of say about his potential run at lightweight?
Well, I think he can do good everywhere. If he as long, I would love it for him to have the stamina that he has in the first 2 rounds. If he can go 4 rounds like that, and even the 5th round, if that's a little shaky, that doesn't really matter. But 3 or 4 rounds fighting like he did, he looked phenomenal. I mean, he was on point. His footwork was great, accuracy, everything was connecting. He did a phenomenal job. But fighting a guy like Alvarez, he fights different than Diaz. Alvarez is like RDA, kind of. If you look at it, he's come brawl, put you up against the fence, starts onslaught on you, and try to take you down. Now, I don't know if that with the footwork of McGregor will work, but eventually, if he gets him pressed up against the fence and he's throwing a heavy leather and then suddenly comes with a takedown, that could be a problem for Conor. But if Conor looks like he did in the first 2 rounds against Diaz, I think we're going to have a great fight.
Well, there's also a bunch of rumors about a potential GSP versus Conor McGregor super fight. Got to get your thoughts, Bas. What do you think of that matchup? Is that a fight that you'd like to see?
No. I would rather see a GSP against somebody with a bit better takedown defense, because we know what's going to happen. I mean, and even if you have great takedown defense, it's still going to be hard not to be taken down by GSP. We know what's going to happen. We'll take him down and then be on top of him. I don't know if that's going to be an exciting fight. The whole time he's on top. I don't know if you can finish him from that once he has him onto the ground. So I don't know. I rather see him against Wonderboy or something like that. I think that will be a really good fight. GSP, I'm talking about.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's talk about GSP. Just in general, what do you think about his recent decision to actually return to active competition after the fairly long break that he's had?
Well, I read today it's in the UFC's court, right? He says the ball is in the court. He knows, they know, this is what he said, they know what he wants. And he's waiting for an answer. I think that he just saw Conor McGregor and great, these pay-per-view numbers going up, and he's got a lot of money. If he made $22 million last year, I think maybe it's time for me to come back, and see if I can beat that. Because if he fights Conor McGregor, he's going to have a cut of that pay-per-view, and that's why, of course, he wants that fight. Every fighter wants to fight Conor McGregor right now because it's a big payday.
A lot of people sort of debating whether or not he's got a good point there when he's talking about the contracts and the fact that things have moved a long way since he last fought. Obviously, the Reebok deal has come to place. He loses a lot of money based on sponsorships. Do you think he's got a good point where he says that he wants a fair deal and his contract sort of to be upgraded in a lot of ways before he gets back into that octagon?
Yeah, and I think that the UFC should grant that. I think he's a very popular guy. He always does great in pay-per-views, and I think he deserves that. And like you said, a lot changed, and that's why he's coming back. I guarantee you that he sees all the big money going around. We don't know if Ronda Rousey is going to come back, so we have only Conor McGregor right now as the big main attraction. Of course, there's a lot of great fighters, but the biggest pool, that's just Conor.
How big do you think a GSP return would be in 2016? Let's say 2016, early 2017. He's been away from the spotlight. How big of a comeback do you think this would be for the sport?
I think it will be great. I think when he decides to come back, that means that he feels really good about his body and his mind. And I think we're going to see a great GSP. I hope, the later fights from GSP were, it was hold him down, keep him down, and peppering him with punches. He didn't really go for the knockout anymore like he used to do. That's why I said, in his last fight, it looked like he didn't have fun anymore. Now, before that, once a fighter is still fun and in training, as well, you can tell they want to be there. And to me, it looked like he did not really enjoy it anymore. I don't know why that just, I had that vision I had when I would see him step in the octagon.
Yeah, well, I sort of had the same vision as you. And George has been saying that he's actually improved a lot since his time away from active competition because he's still been training a lot and that he's actually in his prime at the moment. There is, however, the fact that during his time away, he's had a second ACL surgery and fighters rarely improve with time away. Do you think it's possible that we see a better version of GSP upon his return? What kind of GSP are you expecting when he comes back? And how important do you think that mental, like we just spoke about that, you just mentioned it, how important do you think a fresh mental outlook for GSP will be in terms of making him look better in that octagon?
Well, for me, I was gone for 7 years. And once I decided to do it, that it was so exciting again. It was like almost going for the first time to the UFC, from Pancras to the UFC. I had that fire back. So for me, it was really good. I had no injuries at that moment. It started coming back of course, before the fight. But if he stays away from the injuries and he feels the same as I did, the difference is I was 42, he's 35. At 35, that's, it's a young age. I always said I was the strongest from 30 till 34. That I would say that's where I was mentally and physically, everything was in sync. I was just really strong. So I believe you can fight really well till like 40 years old, especially a guy like Georges St-Pierre. I mean, he's a specimen. He's just a crazy athlete.
Mm. And obviously, while we're speaking about you, Bas, obviously you and George are two guys that retired on massive win streaks and, of course, as champions. But obviously, that's really rare in this sport, where most fighters sort of tend to stay a little bit too long and they go out on a string of losses. And at the moment, people see him as the greatest welterweight of all time. He's still got that aura. In theory, if he never came back, he'd be retiring undefeated. How much of a risk do you think it is for him to come back and potentially damage his legacy?
That's funny that you mentioned, but that's because it's a big risk. For instance, with me, I was fighting Kimo Leopoldo first. Now, already it was not like he was a super fighter at the time anymore, But still, when he tested positive and I had a last-minute replacement, now the pressure was way more on, because there was no way I could lose to this guy, right? Because he took the fight on 3 days' notice. So that pressure, if he's going to get that can play out both ways. With me, I can deal with it easy. I don't know how George is with that, but some people, they can work with it, and other people, they can't. If they do it on top of it in Canada, yeah, he's going to have a lot of pressure on him. If he can stay away from the pressure, if he can focus and just fight the fight, then he will do good. But otherwise, he's going to fight not to lose, and then it's not going to be an exciting fight if that would happen. And if it doesn't happen, then I want to see him shine, man. I want to see the old Georges St-Pierre back, who's like just dropping people left and right and submitting them.
Well, I think the whole MMA community wants to see that. Imagine that. Imagine a new K1 GSP comes back into the octagon. That'll be pretty crazy as well. But he was on UFC Tonight, and he said that he wants a shot at Woodley in Canada at UFC 206 in December. Before we even talk matchups, do you think that's right for him to take after such a long layoff, or would you like to see him have a warm-up fight first, maybe against a Nick Diaz?
No, I don't think. I would love to see it. For me, it doesn't matter. But I think George can fight right away for the title. I mean, if he kept on training, I don't think he loses anything. Like with me with 7 years, there's ring rust or cage rust, whatever you want to call it. I didn't have anything, But that's how we train. We spar 2 times a day. That's unheard of for a lot of fighters, but that's what I do. And not only, of course, we do technique and we drill everything, but it always ends with like at least 5, 6, 7 rounds of sparring. And if you do that, well, then you just stayed in the game. And he's still training with all the top guys, so he knows exactly where he is.
Is it weird that when he was on the show, he said he's interested in bouts with Woodley, Diaz, and Maia, but sort of left that dream fight that you mentioned against Stephen Wonderboy Thompson off the table when he was talking about it? Did you find that strange, or do you think it's because they're friends and he just doesn't want to throw sort of flame into the fire? I just found that interesting because he mentions Maia in the conversation. Then you'd think, hey, wouldn't you mention Wonderboy as well?
Yeah, well, yeah, maybe they're friends, but on the other side, yeah, Maia. Since he mentioned Maia, that would you could think so, yeah. But otherwise, if he says Tyron, yeah, well, he wants to go right away for the title. So yeah, no, I don't see anything in that. That could be just because they're friends.
What do you think about this situation, though, for Stephen Wonderboy Thompson? He's obviously, he's on a great win streak. He's beaten a lot of guys. He's the #1 contender. If GSP does come back and face Tyron Woodley, do you think it's fair? And also, if that's the case, what do you do with Wonderboy Thompson? Well,
then he's going to have to wait a little bit, and I know it doesn't sound fair. I mean, but we're talking about GSP. He's a really good fighter, one of the most known guys on the planet. So I think they should give him a pass to do that, and then Thompson fights the winner.
Well, Joe Silva looks like he's leaving the UFC, so Submission Radio have been practicing their matchmaking skills just in case the UFC come calling. What do you think about this scenario, Bas? If Wonderboy Thompson fights Nick Diaz, and then the winner of that fight can have the title shot. This way, Nick Diaz is back in the picture. If he can beat Wonderboy, then he's more relevant than ever, and then Wonderboy can get that much-needed sort of boost in popularity if he beats Nick Diaz and get a whole new fan base, I suppose, with that fight.
That would be a great fight. I would love to see that. Yeah, the durability of Diaz, and then against Wonderboy Thompson, let's see if he can do something with it. Can he take him to? Does he have good enough takedown skills to get Wonderboy to the ground? That's the thing. Because striking wise, with the long legs that he has and the crazy stance, and I always talk about distance with fighters. It's so important to stay just outside the reach of your opponent, and Wonderboy does that to the T. He does it perfect. You know, he's really good at just staying just outside that reach. So if you make one mistake, boom, he's going to tag you.
Bas, we'll let you go soon, but just a couple more things we want to talk about. One of those, obviously, we got to talk about UFC 203. Got to talk about this main event. Alistair Overeem, Stipe Miocic. What do you think about this fight? And I know you've been doing a few predictions, but or sort of breakdowns, but for those who may not have heard, how do you think this one's going to play out, and who do you think's winning it?
Oh, you know, that's the hard. You just smart money. If you think right now, it's going to be an Overeem because he's good everywhere. He's got the kicks. He's got everything. You know, but we know also that his chin is still a suspect. And Miocic, well, he can hit. And he's a great boxer, great footwork. He can move out of the way. Can he stay away from the clinch? I think the clinch is something that Overeem will look for. I think that's going to be the game plan, because in the clinch, his knees, his elbows, everything is just so powerful. And I think that's where he is the strongest in that fight. Don't get me wrong. He can listen. He's a K1 champion, so he's probably the best striker in the UFC, especially at heavyweight. But you know, it's Miocic has that boxing, and that's what I always say. When he moved backwards and knocked out Verdum, that needs special skills, things like that. Moving backwards while hitting with knockout power, that's a great skill to have, and he has that. So if I expect Overeem to be very cautious, and he will throw probably one or two shots. He won't start throwing combinations, because that will open him up for a counter. But if he stays with straight punches, pop him in, kick here, kick there, he's going to do really well. He just needs to watch out that he's not going to get tagged. And since the 5-round fight was 25 minutes, time for Miocic to connect once really hard to the jaw, and that could end the fight. Then again, you know, Overeem, whatever he throws, is extremely powerful. So that could stop Miocic as well. It's a hard fight to call.
Yeah, well, Stipe has said he wants to have a long reign as champion and break the UFC heavyweight division record. And a lot of great champions have passed who weren't really able to have the biggest of streaks. He wants to be the first to defend the title more than 3 times. Do you think he's the guy to do it?
Well, he's got a very clear head on his shoulders. You know, this is a guy who's just a working guy, still works as a fireman. You see, he's a very clear-headed guy. Most of the time, guys like that are doing really well, because to me, it looks like nothing affects him. You know, not the fans, not bad media or whatever. He's that guy that just goes in and he just fights his fight. So, yeah, he could do it. If he passes Overeem, 100% sure he can do it. Then again, you know, if you got Cain Velasquez coming in and put that onslaught again, constantly moving forward up against the fans, hitting, that's a very hard guy to fight, you know, because that's his bread and butter, and it's very hard to stop that because he's been doing that for such a long time. But once he gets Overeem, if that works, yeah, then I say yes. And of course, you know, when it's not, well, then he already broke the streak. So I don't even have to say that it's not.
CM Punk is also going to be making his UFC and MMA debut, UFC 203. I'm wondering, Bas, did you get to see the recent 30-minute footage of him sparring and looking a lot more smoother? Wondering what you thought and what you're expecting out of his debut.
I expect a lot. I think for a guy to give up a great career that he had at the WWE and to say, listen, I know I just started with this. I just want to do it before it's too late and I become too old. I want to see how it feels. I really admire that, first of all. But for him to do that, he knows he's going to have a tough time. Now, the UFC, of course, doesn't give him a top 10 opponent, which is a very smart thing. Just let's see how he can handle with the pressure and how he can fight. Now, if you look at sparring, I've seen guys hitting the focus mitts in where I started laughing, that I thought they were playing a joke. And then everybody looked at me very angry because it wasn't. and it was horrible. But then when they fight, they look great. And I never got that. I go, why doesn't that technique that you show in the cage come out when you hit the focus mitts or the tie pads? It's so weird. So looking at let me turn this thing off. Good. So looking at sparring or things like that, to me, it does a lot. Doesn't mean a lot. I think it's the most important thing is how his heart is and his stamina. I hope that he's going to have a boatload of stamina. He's going to need it, especially for the first time. You know, there's going to be jitters. This is not WWE. It's something new. You fight in the UFC. Everybody from WWE is going to watch, you know, how he's going to deal with the pressure. And I know he's already been performing in front of people, so that he probably will deal with it, just like a Sakuraba. You know, Sakuraba came from pro wrestling, but he's been in front of big audiences, and that's why they do well. I always compare it also to stand-up comedians. Stand-up comedians, you know, they know how to interact with the audience. They did it many times. It's all live. So when a stand-up comedian does movies, most of the time they're really great actors as well. And I think that's the same in fighting.
All right, Bas, we'll let you go. But before we do, we have to quickly bring up your podcast, Ruttan and Ranallo. You guys have been doing it for a while now, and you're up to episode 27. You've had some fantastic guests on, like Josh Barnett, Daniel Cormier, Big John McCarthy, Max Holloway, Frank Shamrock, Henzo Gracie, Henry Winkler, who's the Fonz, Steve Maraboli, even Booker T and AJ Styles. When are you coming back from your break, and what can listeners expect?
Well, we'll be back. We recorded it this morning. Tomorrow we'll be back as an interview with Alistair Overeem. Mauro did that, the interview with Overeem, and we talked about what happened in this last month. It's a crazy episode. I mean, yeah, if you hear it, you're going to go, oh, don't turn it up the volume too loud, because it's going to be a lot of singing and screaming. And, you know, Mauro, it's hilarious. We were laughing so hard. We were talking about the fact we should have cameras in his house when we prepare, because the stuff that comes out, the facial expressions from Mauro, it is so funny. I told him, I say, if we have cameras, people are not going to believe it. They think we're doing this on purpose, you know, but it is really how we are. We are constantly nuts. We're just nuts. And really us, because I'm telling you, if you see it, you're going to go, like, these guys really that crazy? But, you know, it's fun crazy. And it's all real. It's all us. It's Mauro's real voice, by the way. If he wakes up in the morning and he says a word, that's exactly the same voice as he has on the podcast, just for the listeners, because some listener says, oh, he's got that fake voice. I go, dude, that's his voice. Too bad for him, I guess. But on the other side, really good, because he makes a killing it with it in all the different sports he does and WWE.
Well, there you go, guys. Don't forget to check out Ruttan and Ranallo. A ton of great guests, a ton of great content. Of course, don't forget to follow Bas on Twitter at Bas Rutten MMA. You got to check out his technique videos on his official Facebook, which is Bas Rutten. I feel like they're very underrated. I feel like more people need to check them out. Of course, check out Ruttan and Ranallo. The Alistair Overeem interview is coming out. And, of course, the O2trainer.com. If you've ever heard Bas on the show, you've heard us talk about this a lot. Essentially, it helps you with your lung capacity and breathing. It can help your sports performance. As always, Bas, we appreciate you coming back on the show and chatting with us. Thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome, guys. Thank you. Always good times.
Hi guys, it's Joanna Jędrzejczyk, UFC strawweight champion. Listen to Submission Radio.
All right, guys, joining us here for a second week in a row is the MMA writer for Nevada's largest newspaper, Las Vegas Review-Journal. You may also recognize him from his co-host duties on the Cofield & Co. on ESPN 1100. He returns. We haven't spoken to this guy for a while because he returns just a week later. We liked him so much. After his debut, we couldn't say no. We had to bring him back. Adam Hill, welcome back to Submission Radio.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Now, you guys have convinced me that you really do want me on. Having me 2 weeks in a row, I think I'm convinced now. Like, it wasn't a pity thing. You really wanted me to have me on, so we're good.
Well, we're going steady now, Adam. Before it was just a fling. Now we're going steady. Who knows? A few more appearances, and we will make things official. But let's kick things off by talking about this UFC Fight Night Arlovski versus Barnett card that was out of Germany. That just wrapped up quite literally, not very long ago. It was a card that sort of skimmed under the radar on social media. You didn't really see too many people talking about it, and the fair people of Australia had to tune in at 5:45 in the morning to kick it off with the prelims. So, of course, a lot of people sort of missed out on that, and I believe they'll probably be watching the replay later on today. But there were a few fights worth talking about and a few highlights that we need to mention. I'm going to jump right into the main card and kick it off with a Bader versus Latifi fight. It was a fight in the light heavyweight division. Ryan Bader, who is coming off a somewhat devastating loss to Anthony Johnson, but that's nothing new. We all saw what happened in Vegas when we were there last at UFC 202. Was taking this fight, hoping to sort of get back on a winning track, look good against Latifi, and start putting things together yet again. Adam, I want to go to you first. It was a devastating knee KO finish for Bader, But before we talk about that finish, I just want to get your opinion. What did you think of the way he looked before that finish happened in the fight?
Yeah, I thought he looked pretty good. I had some concerns about Ryan Bader's mental state going into this fight. It's no shame in losing to Anthony Johnson in a knockout fashion, as you mentioned. We know what Anthony Johnson can do, but I think it is difficult mentally to get over that and to try to get ready to get back in there and fight again, knowing, man, like that's what can happen in a moment's notice. You're on this big winning streak. Bader had won 5 straight before the Johnson fight, and it just all came, crashing down just like that. So I wanted to see where he was mentally, and I don't think he looked great today. But I think he looked good enough. And then obviously the finish is one of those, finishes that's going to probably inspire a lot of confidence in him going forward. So I think he did what he had to do. And then to get a win in a devastating fashion like that, I think was really good. It's different circumstances, but it kind of reminded me of Paige Van Zandt a little bit last week in that, he didn't look great. He looked okay. And you're kind of seeing where he is mentally. With Paige, it was more, where she is after doing entertainment stuff. And with Bader, it's where he is after a knockout. So it's different in that regard, but yeah, it's how are they going to look, and they're looking okay, and then they get a devastating knockout, so it kind of makes everything look great. I think it was what he had to do, and Ryan Bader's a guy I've known for a long time. He's a Nevada guy. He's not a Las Vegas guy. He's from up in Reno, but I've been following his career for a long time, and I'm shocked at the run that he made. I never thought he'd win 5 straight in a really loaded light heavyweight division, but he did. He got into contention, and then today he did what he had to do. So good for him.
Yeah, I've been watching some Ryan Bader interviews recently. To me, you touched on the mental state, Adam. He seemed just a lot more relaxed. I feel like the higher you get in the division, the thinner the air gets. And, when you get sort of that 3-fight win streak, 4-fight win streak, 5-fight win streak, you know that you're always 1 fight away from getting a title shot and 1 loss away from getting the whole thing just completely derailed. And obviously that's what happened with Anthony Rumble Johnson, and he lost devastatingly. In this fight, there really wasn't much there. I mean, obviously, he didn't have too much to win. This was a fight to sort of get him back on the horse. If he lost, it certainly would have been devastating. But to me, I just saw a much more sort of relaxed Ryan Bader. And this is exactly the win that he needed. I guess I definitely agree with the sort of comparison to Paige Van Zandt. But the biggest sort of thing that was missing with Ryan Bader's streak previously was that even when he was winning, yeah, some of those fights were dominant, but he wasn't getting these finishes. And then, against, I think it was OSP and I think Phil Davis, he was sort of squeaking by with these really, really close decisions. And here he comes in, puts on a massive statement, does the walkaway KO. I mean, I think my last memory of Ryan Bader scoring a really good KO was actually here in Sydney, where obviously in Melbourne, but here in Sydney, Australia, where he knocked out Keith Jardine to send a massive statement. It reminded me of something like that. Ilir Latifi just falling back, flat on his back, and it's exactly what was missing from Bader's run previously. What did you think, Dennis?
Yeah, well, look, I don't want to be a negative Nancy here, but I like the KO. Obviously, it was very, very good. It looked amazing when Latifi just flew back, but earlier on in the fight, I agree with you, Adam. It was a situation where I wasn't that impressed by a few of the things that Bader was doing. Some of the distancing wasn't very good. Latifi was landing some really good punches. I was actually getting a little bit worried for Bader earlier on in the fight because Latifi was looking pretty good. But again, the confidence builder, the fact that he was able to do it, I'm very interested to see what kind of Ryan Bader we see in the next fight. In the post-fight press conference, I mean, he didn't want to name any names. He didn't want to say who's next. He just wants to take it 1 fight at a time. And he admitted that the stress and the pressure from everybody sort of putting all those expectations on him in his last fight against Anthony Johnson sort of did something to him. I'm just curious, Adam, do you think in that Johnson fight, the mental side of things just wasn't there for Bader when he went in there? Do you sort of believe what he's saying, that it was just too much expectation from fans for him to get that win against Johnson, and that was one of the downfalls that he had in that fight?
Yeah, I believe it, and I believe that he believes that. But at the same time, like, he was fighting Anthony Johnson, and you can say, I didn't have the right mental state. I wasn't believing in myself. I had too much pressure. You can say all the things you want. The bottom line is he went in against a guy who's just much better than him, and who knocks out everyone, and he got knocked out. So I think he almost needs to put that just in the past. I mean, maybe this is what he has to do mentally to kind of refocus himself and keep moving forward. But I think he just chalked that up as, hey, ran into a really good guy. He knocked me out. I have to, trust in the training that got me 5 straight wins and put me in position to be mentioned in all those, in all those title pictures and everything like that. Because at some point, if he's going to keep winning, he's going to be back at that level. And then he's going to have to try to deal with that expectation again, unless his plan is just, hey, take a bunch of fights and make a bunch of money and you don't care about pursuing a title. At some point, you're going to have to, you can't have this, hey, I don't care attitude, because you're going to get back in title picture. And then what do you do? So I think he's just trying to talk himself into it at some point.
I definitely got that vibe as well from those interviews where he seemed almost surprisingly laid back, like he was trying to convince him that, it's no big deal, this is just another fight. I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Adam, just in terms of Ryan Bader. He's 33, he obviously had that great win streak, got derailed, now he's back on the horse, in a light heavyweight division that really is sort of starving for new up-and-comers and new contenders. What do you think as far as Ryan Bader's chances of actually making it to sort of the big show and finally getting that title shot that, people in 2011 were saying that surely he would get, and then it's just been one derailment after another. He's sort of always slipped up when he's had a big step up in competition. Do you think at some point at 33 years of age he can actually get the big one?
No, I don't. I don't think it's ever going to happen. I think he's just a really good fighter, and it happened at a bad time. You look at, we're going to talk about Alexander Gustafsson in a minute, but he's just not quite at the level of those top three guys. I mean, he's competed right there with them, but he's lost to all three of those top contenders. Now, I think if given another chance, he could beat them. But let's face it, he is he's in his own kind of class behind the top of the division, and I don't think Bader is really anywhere near the Alexander Gustafsson class even. So, I mean, that's a lot of guys to jump over. That's a whole different class of fighters to try to get through. So I think Bader is just going to be one of those guys. Again, I was surprised. Give him credit. He won those 5 in a row against some pretty good competition. You talk about St. Preux, Phil Davis, Rashad Evans. He's beaten some really good guys. But he's just not quite, at that upper echelon of the 205-pound class. And that class is going to be, well, depending on what happens with John Jones and suspension and everything, I mean, that's 3 guys and now a 4th in the mix with Gustafsson that are just going to be trading title shots for a while. And I just don't see Bader getting in that mix.
I'll tell you what, I've got a little sneaky plan to get Bader that title shot. Not sure if he's going to win it, but I think there's a good chance that he gets it. But let's talk about the next fight first before I unravel my thoughts and plans. As you know, Adam, Joe Silva's left the company, and I think the UFC regularly listen to this show, so they'll be listening to my thoughts on what happens next. Let's talk about this next light heavyweight fight again between Gustafsson and Blachowicz. Interesting fight here. Gustafsson away for quite some time. People not really sure what was going to be happening next, what kind of Alexander we were going to see. A lot of people believed he was going to go out there and put on a display, but that's not exactly what happened in this fight. Sure, the takedowns came to him. He was able to notch out a decision win, but Jan had a lot, and I mean a lot of success on the feet in this fight. And at times I thought, hey, this might be Jan's night. I want to jump to you first, Casper. What did you think on the way this fight played out? And did you think it was going to go this way, or did you think that Gustafsson was going to have a lot easier time beating Jan in this fight?
Stylistically, like if you had asked me this maybe a couple of years ago, I would have thought that Gustafsson would have ran through Blachowicz, who in his own right is a good striker. But just with, the losses that Gustafsson's had, the wars that he's had, the John Jones fight, the Daniel Cormier fight, I think it took a massive mental toll, and he's very open about potentially wanting to retire, and then he didn't. So Gustafsson kind of reminds me of Carlos Condit in a sense that he's almost got 1 foot in and 1 foot out. I'm really curious about where he is with his mental state, and I don't know. To me, it showed. He definitely didn't look great in the first round. There wasn't much head movement. Jan's pressure seemed to really be working for Jan and not doing Gustafsson any favors. And it was crazy for me to see Gustafsson clearly not wanting to stand with Jan and essentially turning into a wrestler. I mean, kudos to him for being smart and not being like a lot of other fighters who sort of fight with ego and think, look, I'm meant to be the striker here. I'm going to stand with him even if it's to my detriment. So kudos to him for switching things up mid-fight. And I feel like this is, again, another one of those confidence builder fights. It's definitely not something that's going to really vault him into title contention. I think if it does, it's really only because the light heavyweight division is a thin division, but it's not really a good look, though, when the number 2 guy in Gustafsson and a former title challenger, multiple-time title challenger, goes the distance like that against an unranked fighter. So definitely wasn't Gus's best performance.
Yeah, Adam, I'm curious to hear your thoughts because even though those takedowns came and he was able to get Jan to the ground, it wasn't one of those situations where it was an impressive number of takedowns. Jan was sort of walking forward and letting Gustafsson shoot in there and take him down. What did you take away from Alexander's performance that you could look at and say, okay, this is something positive that we could look at, something good that came out of this fight for Alexander, apart from just the fact that he's got the win?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I figured I was going to be the ultra negative Alexander Gustafsson voice in this discussion because
it's me.
I thought the same thing that you're saying, that he had a lot of struggles. He caught a lot of punches that I didn't think he was going to catch. He didn't use his distance. He had a reach advantage, as he almost always does, and he didn't use it well. He was just taking too many shots, and he looked awkward on the feet at times. So I thought I was going to be the one to really calm everything down and say, hey, listen, he's got a lot of work to do. But let me take the positive approach from what happened. He adjusted his game. He showed a lot of growth, because there was a time Gustafsson could get caught up in brawling a little bit and being a little immature and being that fighter that you talked about who might just try to slug it out and try to get through it and might end up taking a loss because of his pride getting in the way. But I think he showed a lot of growth as a fighter and maturity to say, all right, listen, it's not going my way right now. I can surprise this guy a little bit, because he is, Jan talked after the fight. He said, I didn't think he was going to try to take me down. He's like, kudos to him for doing it. I didn't think it was going to happen. So it was wide open. And yeah, it wasn't like the greatest takedowns in the world, but he did a good job, changing levels. And when Jan would try to walk forward, Gustafsson knew that he could just go, drop down, get a takedown, and control the fight on the ground. The name of the game is winning. In the end, you have to be entertaining. There's all the other aspects that go into things, but it is still a sport. You're trying to win. He found the path to victory, and he won the fight. And so I think we have to give him a lot of credit for that. And it's nothing that's going to blow you away and think, all right, Gustafsson's back. He needs to be in a title shot tomorrow. But it is a win, and he's been out a long time. And I think you have to take some positives from what he was able to do as far as having a mature game plan and following through.
And I sort of like what you said about how, he avoided that damage. And I guess in that sense, you're right. That is a lot of growth, because when you do come off those massive wars, and people are sort of wondering and questioning whether he's still recovered from that massive war against John Jones and then that, follow-up war with Daniel Cormier, I guess to go in there and really take the least damage-worthy approach is probably a good thing, and something that, he might be thinking of. He might be thinking of his, not only his career, but his long-term health. I'm just wondering, to me, it also seemed like the layoff affected him. Adam, do you think that the answer for Gustafsson is to just really get in there more and get more of a feel for, I guess, just get more cage time?
Yeah, possibly that's something. And to get the confidence back, because as we said, the losses have been to those top three guys, and there's no shame in any of that. Those are three of the best fighters in the entire world. And a minute ago, I called it a game plan. It wasn't a game plan. It actually was even more maturity in his game, in that it wasn't a game plan. The game plan was, to stay on the outside, to use his jab, and to do what he usually does as far as trying to, find a knockout. But he changed it up midstream. I think that's even more impressive from what he was able to do, and say, all right, my game plan is not working. What is plan B? What can I see that that's open in this fight that maybe wasn't planned in training camp? So I think that's where I'm kind of going with that, is that, to be able to not just have one game plan, but to have something else that you see during the fight is very encouraging to me about Gustafsson as a fighter. But yeah, I think he needs to stay in there. I think, it was, battle, 2 losses in a row, and then being out for a while. I think he'd probably be best served to try to get back in there, in 2.5, 3 months, maybe jump right back in and get another fight and get another win under his belt.
Okay. Well, this is where we get to my master plan of how Ryan Bader ends up with a title shot. Now, we know DC and I think Anthony Johnson will probably be fighting next. We'll see what happens to John Jones and how long his suspension is. But with those two guys fighting, I think, to me, it's a no-brainer to have Gustafsson fight Ryan Bader. And the way that Gustafsson looked tonight or just before and Ryan Bader looked, I think he's got a good shot of beating Gustafsson. If he beats Gustafsson and Jones is still out with a suspension, I mean, in the meantime, I could see him possibly getting a title shot. I want to get your thoughts, guys. I mean, is it a no-brainer at this point that Gustafsson gets Ryan Bader next? Adam, we'll go with you first.
It would make sense to me. I don't know if it's a no-brainer. I don't think anything's a no-brainer anymore with the UFC. Who knows what's even happening with a lot of their matchmaking and who's even going to be doing that going forward. But yeah, I think it makes sense to put those guys. Bader is up there at the top of the division. We talked about the loss, but again, he's won his last 6 fights that didn't come against Anthony Johnson. So he's been very good. Gustafsson's right there, and it would set up a nice little 4-man tournament for while John Jones is out, however long it may be. It doesn't look like it's going to be 2 years anymore, although it could be. So say it's a year. You can have that little 4-man tournament in the year while Jones is gone, and then Jones pops right back in and fights whoever is the champion at the time, maybe. So it would make sense to me.
Yeah, I'm with you guys. We're all in the same boat. I mean, if you look at everybody in the rankings, Gustafsson's number 2 at the moment. Glover's number 3, who's just coming off a devastating loss. I think at some point it'd be fun to see Glover and Gustafsson fight, but at the moment it just doesn't make sense. You need someone who can sort of catapult Gustafsson and give him a bit of a momentum with the win. And then you got Ryan Bader number 4. You look below, OSP's number 5. Doesn't really make sense for either guy. And then below there you've got Shogun, who is really out of the picture, and Rashad Evans, who's going down the middleweight, and anyone else sort of is really not in the picture at all. So yeah, I think Bader versus Gustafsson makes sense, and I don't know if that really would be that much of a winnable fight for Bader. I'm certainly not counting him out, even based on tonight's performance and of both men. I still think that's a really, really tough fight for Bader. I think that with Gustafsson's sort of takedown defense and actually surprisingly good wrestling for, being a guy that didn't really have that wrestling background, I still think Gustafsson takes it. The only sort of challenge there is that the 3 biggest guys, even with a win for Gustafsson, the 3 biggest guys in the division or closest to a title picture, Rumble Johnson, Daniel Cormier, and John Jones, all have wins over Gustafsson. So if he's going to win, he's going to have to put a really, really strong performance to really sort of get back in there with a title shot. And hopefully for Gustafsson, John Jones is the champion, because I think that's a fight that people still want to see.
Yeah, knowing Ryan Bader's luck, he'll beat Gustafsson and John Jones will come back in and they'll just give John Jones the title shot anyway. But yeah, we'll see what happens there, because very, very interesting fight. I think the reason why it's an interesting fight is Ryan Bader's improved a lot on the feet, and Gustafsson won't be able to take him down if things don't go his way, and he's looking rusty on the feet like he did today. So it will be very, very interesting to see what happens in that fight. But yeah, the division is in an interesting position at the moment, so we'll see what happens. Let's jump over to the main event. It's an interesting fight where you got sort of a couple of guys that have been around the block for a while. Josh Barnett and Andrei Arlovski, 2 guys that have been headlining events for a very, very long time, and here they are in Germany, locking horns. And of course, Arlovski not really getting many wins as of late. He was on the win streak, but then now he's been losing fight after fight. Let's jump into the first round. It was a pretty exciting exchange. Both guys had moments where you thought the fight was going to finish. Go to you first, Adam. When you saw that Arlovski was beginning to unload on Barnett, did you think he was going to win that fight in the first round? Were you surprised that Barnett was able to catch him and sort of weather the storm?
I don't know if I was surprised. I mean, it was crazy, because I don't know if you have that much time to react. Because I watched it back actually a couple of times, and it's 30 seconds, and it's just right hand after right hand trading back and forth. Barnett gets stunned and almost drops to a knee. Arlovski looks like he's out momentarily, and then it kind of goes back. It's like they both were out twice on their feet, and then all of a sudden it just slowed down and grinded to a halt. And I think after you had a chance to catch a breath, it was like, what's happening? And then you catch your breath and you look and like, okay, now Barnett has settled in. He pushes him back against the cage and starts to breathe. I thought that, okay, he's under control, and I think eventually he's going to win. I actually thought going in, I told a lot of people that I thought it was a complete mismatch for Barnett, and that he was going to win fairly easily and get a submission at some point. I didn't expect him to go through as much adversity as he did in the first round. But yeah, I think once it started to settle down a little bit, I was like, okay, I think Barnett is back in. And he'll be able to get the victory that I thought he was going to. But then Arlovski got a takedown and had pretty good position at one point as well. So it wasn't an easy fight for Barnett, certainly. But I think what I expected to happen was going to happen. And then, of course, it's the ending sequence is triggered by an eye poke that the ref doesn't see, and then he very easily could have stopped the fight as Barnett kind of walks back to the cage covering his eye. That's the kind of situation where sometimes a referee will just step in and say, "Oh, you're hurt. Okay, we're not going to do this. You can't turn your back on your opponent." But they keep it going, and Barnett's able to persevere and come through and get the victory. But yeah, it was a really crazy 30 seconds. But I think that 30 seconds also led us to believe it was a much better fight than it really was.
Yeah, that's a good point. I feel like there was a lot of praise, and I don't want to be that guy to take anything away from both these guys because they are warriors, but the second round, like, really slowed down considerably. Like, it just, like you mentioned, just grinded to a halt. One thing that stood out to me in that first exchange is that the initial right hand from Barnett that rocked Andre Arlovski, it was a really, really sort of short punch. Didn't really look like it had much behind it. So it was alarming to see Andre, who almost miraculously, his chin has somewhat seemingly recovered over the last couple of years, and to see him get rocked by a shot like that definitely didn't look good. And then obviously the crazy amount of punches that were thrown by Arlovski completely threw caution to the wind and left his defense completely open, which allowed Barnett to get that other shot in that sort of dropped him. I was amazed at how quickly both guys recovered, though. But that last sort of sequence that ended the fight was something else. I mean, with Barnett sort of turning around, sort of walking to the cage, Arlovski, one thing I was amazed at was the fact that he wasn't able to finish Barnett or hurt him at all further after being in such a vulnerable position. I mean, Barnett literally had his hands down or had one on his eye. Arlovski came through that big punch, I think it was a right, almost fell over, and then Barnett sort of got him straight to the ground almost straight afterwards, and that was essentially the sort of ending sequence. So a lot of crazy moments in that fight, and I guess if it wasn't for those ones, it might have been a little bit flat. I actually thought that Barnett was going to grind it out maybe over 3, 4, 5 rounds, get a decision or a late sort of submission. But yeah, if it wasn't for those moments, I think it would have been something else.
What I love about Barnett is how he uses these catch wrestling techniques that a lot of people sort of think, let's do a standing Kimura and flip the guy over. Like, a lot of people in an MMA gym will say, look, that probably would work 10 years ago, but now guys are ready for it. But you see Barnett, he goes in there and he does his catch wrestling, he catches guys, and it's really refreshing to see. And then he'll talk about the technique for what seems like months afterwards about how it all works. And it kind of takes me back to the early days of the UFC where you had guys sort of going for more basic techniques and getting them. So it's one of the reasons I love watching Barnett. He's just so good at what he does, and he just goes for it. It was interesting to note as well that post-fight, Barnett had a bit of a speech where he spoke about how even though Arlovski has lost now 3 times in a row, he mentioned that he's lost to Stipe, who's the champion, Alistair Overeem, who's fighting the champion, and himself, who's a top-level fighter. So even though it's 3 losses in a row, he's fighting top-level guys, and the UFC should keep him around. Adam, I just want to get your thoughts on that notion. Do you think Barnett has a point? Even though Arlovski has lost 3 in a row, it has been against some world-class competition.
Yeah, I'm going to say both. I mean, he has a point, of course. The 3 losses, and Arlovski had this great resurgence. He was right back in the title picture, and we were talking about this great late career run, and now he's lost 3 fights. And Barnett is absolutely right. Look at the competition; it's been great. But that doesn't mean I think Arlovski, should not retire. I absolutely think he should walk away. I've wanted it for a while. Andre Arlovski is like the first guy that I was a fan of before I started covering the sport. When I first started, as somebody who's covered it for a long time, you kind of, disavow yourself of any, fandom or favorites or anything like that. But before I covered the sport, he was my guy. And then to be able to cover him and now to see this late career resurgence, it's been really cool. But I still have that, like, man, when he used to walk out with the Fang mouth guard, and it was just like, he was like the scariest dude ever. I remember that guy, and like that was the guy, and I first interviewed him and was kind of starstruck by it and everything, and it was cool. And now I just look at it and I'm like, he's still an elite fighter. He's still near the top of the world among heavyweights. He can beat most guys out there, and in fact, he could have won tonight, certainly. I mean, he was close to getting a knockout, but he's taken so many knockouts. He took 2 knockouts in a row before this fight. You mentioned got rattled again tonight. I just don't know how many you want to see him take when, the one thing he kind of has right now is trying to make that one last push for a title, and I just don't see it happening. So what is he doing other than just kind of being out there and taking fights and, trying to hold on to whatever he can at the end of his career and make some more money, but I don't know how many times I want to see that happen and him potentially get knocked out. You don't have to wait until somebody is completely shot to retire. A lot of times you're like, oh, that's it. We just saw he just got knocked out, 3 more times. I guess he's done. Well, we don't have to get to that point all the time. He's an older guy. He's 37. He's taken a bunch of knockouts. I really wish, even though he's capable of being a top-level fighter, that he wouldn't fight anymore.
I definitely agree with you, Adam. I would have zero issue with Andrei Arlovski walking away from the sport. I mean, he's had an amazing career, a lot of highlights. And I think, it wasn't too long ago that people were sort of holding on to that dream that maybe he will have that amazing Cinderella story and late career resurgence and actually get the title shot. I think that dream is sort of dead at this point. It doesn't look like it's going to happen. The only thing is, he's a known heavyweight. And I mean, there's an ongoing joke around us media, or at least people who, upload video content at UFC events, is that Wi-Fi, it's like liquid gold. It's like the highest commodity you can have. And heavyweights in the UFC, I feel like, are kind of the same thing, You look at the division, there aren't really that many guys who are really coming up in the rankings. There aren't really many new prospects. It's an older division. And, you kind of always need to look to the future. I think with Andrei Arlovski, he's a perfect fit because you can put him on these cards like UFC Hamburg that wasn't the greatest card and didn't really have too much of a direction, but hey, it's got a decent and fun main event. So I see if Andrei Arlovski is going to retire or leave the sport, it's going to be on his own terms. It's going to be because he's going to make that choice. Because I think that if the UFC has a hand in it, I think they'll definitely want to keep him around. 3 losses in a row or 4 losses in a row, it doesn't really matter. Maybe at some point someone will sit down and have a chat with him and say, look, Andre, you're taking way too much damage and, you need to sort of think about hanging it up. But for the moment, I think, having a name like Arlovski, who is an exciting fighter, I don't think they're going to want to see him go anywhere.
And yeah, sorry, go on, Adam.
We should say after the fight, I mean, he made no indication he was going to walk away. He's talking about what he wants to do next and getting back in there, all that stuff. And I agree with everything that you said. I think he still can compete. I think he still is marketable. It's just, I think far too often we wait until it's so obvious that a guy should walk away that we're like, hey, he should walk away now. I don't think we need to go all the way to that point anymore of like, oh, it's obvious that guy needs to leave. He doesn't have to retire. He's still got plenty left. I just think we don't want to get to that point where it's like, oh yeah, this is when he should absolutely do it because it's so obvious now.
Yeah, and I think as a fighter in the heavyweight division, it's almost a lure to stay in there because, hey, if I get 3 or 4 fights, no matter where I am sort of in the top 10, there's a good chance I'm getting that title shot because there's no one in there. So you're always thinking, well, I could probably headline these little cards in Germany and stuff like that as well because I'm a big commodity. So interesting to see what happens next. But I agree with you, Adam. Look, the brain damage thing is a serious, serious problem. And that doesn't come out till years and years after. I mean, people need to watch the movie Concussion just to sort of see some of the crazy stuff that's happened in the NFL in the later years after you're done taking all your concussions. But one of the things I think that is going for Arlovski is the fact is he's with Jackson Winklejohn. I think the way that he's training, the way that he's sparring, I think Greg Jackson and Mike Winklejohn, I think they're very, very smart and restricting the amount of brain damage he's getting leading into fights now. I think he's sparring a lot less than back in the day. So I think that's going to give him a little bit more time to stay in the fight game. But certainly you'd think 1 or 2 more sort of tough knockout losses would hopefully encourage his team to talk to him about retiring. But I think that a next potential fight for Arlovski could be against a guy like Derek Lewis if he wins his next fight, or even a guy like Stephen Struve.
What are you trying to do to this poor guy? You're trying to kill this guy.
Joe Silva might be leaving, Adam. I don't know if you heard earlier in this thing. I'm trying to make some money here for the UFC. Dana White's listening right now. I'm putting up some good ideas. And again, I know what you're saying, but from the UFC's perspective, if Derek Lewis does win his next fight, you want to build his name, you put him up against like a guy like Arlovski who's got some name value, and there's a good chance Lewis might get the job done. You might take that ticket, as sad as it sounds.
So you're looking at this as sort of growing Derek Lewis, and you obviously don't like Andrei Arlovski to match him up against Derek Lewis, right?
That's right. I also hate women and children while we're at it, so everybody get on the hate train. Now, look, I love everybody. I'm a guy that loves everybody. Let's talk about Barnett, though. What's next for Barnett? Because there's going to be a card in Melbourne. Still not sure who the main event and the co-main event of that card will be. He's had a fight previously with Mark Hunt that he's won. It's pretty soon. November's pretty soon to now. But do you guys think there's any chance Josh Barnett might meet Mark Hunt in a rematch if the UFC is able to figure out all the differences with Mark Hunt, which at this stage might not be very likely as well?
It doesn't seem likely that there's going to be a very good working relationship anytime soon. There, I'm just kind of looking. I'm not sure. I don't really know what the next matchup is. He's in that one of those weird spots where, a lot of the guys have fights, so you don't really know what's going to be next for them. Try to look at the ranks right now. Dos Santos is back from injury. He's kind of looking for a fight. I don't know. I don't know what to do with him because he's not quite at the top level yet. The guy right in front of him right now is Ben Rothwell, who they just fought. The Hunt thing makes sense because they're right around in the rankings. But like I said, I don't know, what's going on, and where is their relationship right now that they'd be able to book a fight with him? You would think if he's going to fight, it would be down there, but I don't know where their relationship is.
Yeah, I think that's why Mark Hunt is so valuable to the UFC, because anytime they come to Australia, if they're doing a fight night and it's not a pay-per-view and they can't rely on these big international stars, bang, you put Mark Hunt in the main event, and of course the Aussies love it. I'm with Adam, man. I don't know if that's going to be happening anytime soon or who knows ever. And the other thing is, with Mark Hunt, his issue is with PED users. I mean, Josh Barnett, he has a really big past in that. I don't think Mark Hunt would be too keen to step in there. I mean, he does love rematches, so maybe that's a lure, but yeah, I don't see that happening. You mentioned Derek Lewis. I actually think Josh Barnett and Derek Lewis would make a lot more sense, because Derek Lewis, I mean, his ground game certainly is kind of lacking, but it is something that's improving. And if he can beat a guy like Josh Barnett, again, that's a ticket that you can punch, and that's sort of a big win for him. As far as everybody else sort of above him in the rankings, yeah, I mean, he just fought Roy Nelson, Ben Rothwell sort of, they just fought recently as well, and all the other guys like Junior and Overeem, McKay Velasquez, Verdum, and Stipe, they're all a little bit high in the pecking order. So, I don't know, I kind of think Derek Lewis makes sense.
Yeah, well, we'll see if Lewis gets through his next fight, UFC Fight Night 97. Guys, before we wrap up this chat, let's quickly touch on a couple of topics that have been circulating through the news world, and I'm sure this is something that you've written about time and time again, Adam, and that's the relationship between the UFC and its fighters. We've seen it emerge again this week when GSP was talking about the fact that the UFC and him are sort of struggling to come to a deal. In particular, apparently, the UFC management or the people the owners aren't returning phone calls to his agent. It seems like there's a bit of hardball being played at the moment. A lot of people wondering sort of what the deal is. GSP's a huge star. Is it hardball? Is it the fact that the new owners just ain't got time for this shit? I'm not sure what it is, Adam. You've been around the situation many, many times again with the previous owners. How do you read into this whole thing?
Yeah, this is a really complicated one, so this might have to be like a 12-hour broadcast you guys do. Here's the bottom line on it. There's a couple of things at play. First of all, the biggest thing to me with St-Pierre is the sponsorship stuff. He made a ton of money from sponsors, and that was pre-Reebok. So now he's walking back into a Reebok world where he has really none of the opportunities as far as making sponsorship money in the cage. So he's going to want a lot more money on the front end if he's going to wear Reebok, if he's even going to ever agree to that. So I don't know that I don't know that he's holding out to maybe not wear Reebok, or if he's just trying to get a ton more money. I would imagine money would take care of all of that, and then he could take care of his sponsors during the week. That's on the GSP side. I think he's absolutely committed to fighting in Toronto. He wants to fight there. He just needs to make the money right. There's a lot of things working on the other end. The biggest one, which I think is talked about, but I don't think people understand how big this is. So here's the thing. UFC was bought by William Morris Endeavor IMG. It's WME IMG. It's a major firm here in America. Their biggest thing, they've got into a lot of different businesses now, but their main thing is they're an agency for a lot of the biggest stars in Hollywood. Their biggest rivals in Hollywood as an agency is CAA. GSP is repped by CAA. So this is the first, and it's going to happen a couple times. There's some more fighters under CAA umbrella. This is the first big showdown, and it's really weird now that WME IMG, which usually is an agency representing entertainers and athletes for their contracts, now they're on the other side of the table, and CAA is representing their client with WME, and I think it's a real stalemate that's going to have to be figured out because the UFC as it is. I mean, they're going to survive no matter what, whatever. But they can't have a situation where none of the CAA clients are going to be able to work out deals with the WME people, that it's going to get this ugly, because this goes beyond the UFC. This is, the Hollywood power brokers. If you look up, like, all the biggest A-list celebrities in Hollywood, they're all rep by one of these companies for the most part. This is a huge rivalry. and it's not just about the GSP deal, but this is really what's in the front of everybody's mind right now, because this is what we're paying attention to. So I don't think it's an easy fix to get these sides together, and that it would make sense to why the UFC people and the WME people are no longer calling St-Pierre back, because I think it's far beyond just a deal between those two. In the end, I think it almost has to get done. The UFC is going to put everything they have in a UFC 205 to make New York big. So 206, you really don't have to do much if you have St-Pierre on the card. So I think they're going to get it done. They'll make that happen. Eventually, Georges St-Pierre will fight at UFC 206, and I think as small as it is, and I don't know exactly how the dynamics work, but if it was as ugly as it is, as it's being made out between St-Pierre and the UFC, I just don't think St-Pierre would have been allowed to go on UFC Tonight this week.
Yeah.
Which is Fox Sports 1 show, but UFC does have some editorial control over it. I don't think they would have put him on there to air out the dirty laundry if it was that ugly. So I think at some point it's going to get done.
Yeah, I mean, there were rumors that they were going to be announcing Conor McGregor versus GSP on that show, but exactly, it's the first thing you think when you see GSP is going to be appearing on there. You think, oh, well, UFC and GSP, they must be on some kind of good terms, or essentially what the UFC is trying to do is promote GSP. Why would they be doing it if he's not going to be fighting at some point? So I think they're sort of, testing the waters there. I agree with you, there's a little bit of stalling there, and there's a lot of hardball being played. And I think one of the telling points was when Dana White came out and said, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson has the next title shot because blah, 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 it isn't fair to anybody else. And I kind of thought, when has fair had anything to do with it? I mean, you make, let's be honest, we've said it many times in this show. I mean, as much as we love MMA, as much as we love, the UFC, it really borders on whether it is or isn't a sport, and that's not taking anything away from the, ridiculous amount of talent and hard work that all these fighters put in. But as far as, the fights that are put on and the matchmaking, it really is all about entertainment. So to me, I think, well, if Stephen Wonderboy is getting a title shot, it's not because he doesn't deserve it, but it's probably because they couldn't get a deal done with GSP, or they're trying to sort of play hardball and get, sort of appear in front of GSP like, look, we don't need you. But and that in itself is sort of an interesting one, because on one hand, they do need GSP for Canada. I mean, if you're going to have that Toronto card, who else are you going to have? Who else are you going to be sort of having to main event that card? On the other hand, even though the UFC sort of, you would look at and think they don't have a crazy amount of stars. They got Conor, they may or may not have Ronda. It's still been a really, really good year for them thus far as pay-per-view. So I feel like they need him, but they don't need him. But I guess they'd certainly be a lot better off with him there and to make a comeback, especially considering that he's saying this isn't a one-fight thing, is going to be potentially sort of, making a real run at it. So, him being a proven draw, you've essentially locked in that you've got a few pay-per-views that are going to be doing close to, if not over, $1 million.
Well, Adam, it seems like the theme throughout the show today with me and Casper has been sort of talking about what's going to be happening next with Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. He was on the show just before, of course, and we spoke about it with him as well. Just want to get your thoughts on it. If it does look like everything works out and GSP does fight Tyron Woodley at UFC 206, what do you do with Thompson from the UFC's perspective? Does he fight someone else next? Does he, does he sit out and wait? Does he do a Tyron Woodley and he sort of waits for a while? Well, what would you have him do?
I think he should have a lot, and I obviously didn't get to hear what you guys were talking about, but I think it's in his best interest to probably wait. We see, I know guys don't like to sit around and wait and not make their money, and that's how they make their living. But in the end, winning the title is such a valuable thing for your career, not only from a prestige standpoint, from a financial standpoint. And we've seen it with the women's bantamweights. They have chosen not to wait, and they missed out on the giant chance at a payday that they could have had by waiting. And who knows how long they would have had to wait for Ronda. But, I would be willing to wait a year. I'd be willing to wait as long as it takes to get that giant payday that you might not ever get otherwise. It's not quite as bad in the welterweight division because you can take other fights and you can make money. But Stephen Thompson is in a great position where he is absolutely clear-cut the number one contender. And whether he gets the shot next or he has to wait until after St-Pierre and Tyron Woodley fight, I would wait for it because say St-Pierre wins. Now you're next in line. You're absolutely the next contender to fight Georges St-Pierre, which is a massive opportunity. It's a legacy type fight, and financially, it's the biggest fight that you could possibly do. So I think for all those reasons, I would wait, unless it's going to be late 2017 or something like that. But if they fight in November and you get the fight, March or April, I don't have a problem waiting for that. But I don't know if he demands a fight. It's tough. Who would you fight? Who would you want to fight if you're Stephen Thompson, where you're sure? I mean, I'm sure he's confident, but that you're sure you're going to get a win and maintain that spot in line. That's a tough call because all those challengers at 170 are pretty tough.
Well, there you go. It's a crazy time in MMA. We'll see what happens next. Guys, make sure to follow Adam on Twitter at Adam Hill LVRJ. Las Vegas Review Journal does great work. Adam, just quickly, anything coming up this week that you want people to look out for?
That's I probably should have thought about that, but no, we had a lot of great coverage, and I do as always when I do these, I like to shout out to our videographer Heidi Fang, who I think is one of the best in the business. She does a lot of great work, and she does not only with some of the UFC guys, but a lot of the local up and comers that she talks to. She just talked to both Henry Cejudo and Joseph Benavidez after filming on The Ultimate Fighter. Great videos there, and she does a lot of great jobs, a lot of great work finding out the different stories that are coming up. So check her out. Check out her stuff up at coveringthecage.com as well, where my stuff is, and I think she should be applauded for all the work she does, and our photographers too. Our main guy Eric Verduzco, I think is there's a lot of really good MMA photographers, but I think our photos after events that are here in Las Vegas are worth looking at just in themselves. So always up at coveringthecage.com. Check out our stuff.
Yeah, well, Heidi Fang, not only is she just great all across and does amazing work, but she's actually, people don't know this, she's like one of the nicest people that you can come across in the media area. Always has a smile on, always helping everyone out. And guys, make sure to follow her on Twitter at Heidi Fang. I'm sure you already do because she has great content. But Cass, that comes to the end of the show. We have some guests that we want to thank. Thank you so much to Richard Perez, Bas Rutten, and of course, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson for jumping on the show. Before we let the people go, Cass, anything else that we need to remind them before we come back next week?
Yeah, I mean, we just sort of gave Adam a good plug and Heidi a good plug. Give ourselves a really quick plug as well. Don't forget to check us out on Twitter at SubmissionAUS. Give us a follow. A lot of fun gifts there. Of course, check us out on Facebook. We're not hard to find there. Also, we've got a bunch of apparel and a bunch of t-shirts. We've got new ones coming out soon, actually. A bunch of new designs. But if you want the stock standard official Submission Radio apparel, just go to our website, go to the top right and click store, and you can check that out there. I think that's pretty much it. Have I forgotten anything else, Dennis? Oh, reviews. Don't forget to give us some sweet reviews. Give us whatever your opinion is. Be honest. And on iTunes, because that stuff helps us obviously jump up in the rankings, and that's what we want. Anything else that I forgot, Dennis?
No, that sounds good to me. And I'll tell you what, next week, we'll read out some of the top reviews, some of the new reviews that you guys put down. So if you're thinking about putting down a review for Submission Radio on iTunes, Stitcher, or TuneIn, we'll have a look through before we do the episode next week, and we'll pick out some reviews and read them out at the end of the show next week just to thank you guys for your amazing reviews. So a bit of incentive there. Until then, we'll catch you guys next week.